Hello, everybody. How are you? I'm Tony Lee Peters, and I am very well. Thank you for asking. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how to get your life back on track. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I had such a great response to my post yesterday, my wanted post, looking for people who are serious about finding their purpose in life. I have a few spaces available, so if you haven't checked that post out, it's all over my social media. So check it out, fill out the survey, and if you are serious, jump on board quick because places are going really quickly. Okay, so how to get your life back on track. Now, all the information, or most of the information, you'll find out why in a minute, most of the information that I'm going to share with you in this video will be available on a handy cheat sheet. So if you would like your own copy of that, just type the words "my life" in the comments below and I will send that to you via Facebook Messenger. Okay, so I am going to deviate from what I normally do, and I'm going to share quite a personal story about my own life and about a time when my life took a massive downward spiral. But I'm also going to share with you how I was able to get my life back on track, because maybe some of the things that I did might be able to help some of you guys. Okay, so in my early 20s, I really hit rock bottom. I went through a very deep and dark depression, and as I said, a downward spiral that led to that place in time. And that was during a period when I had no contact with my children. So in my early 20s, my partner, my ex-partner and I decided that we should break up, and that it would be best for the children if she moved back to her home city of Plymouth and take the children with her. Now, obviously, I knew that we were breaking up and I knew the reasons behind that, and I knew that it was best for my daughters to go with their mother, but nevertheless, I was still completely heartbroken. And I can remember the exact moment when I felt that my life had completely derailed. So a day before they were all due to go back to Plymouth, I invited them round to my flat because we were living separately at this point. And I invited them to my flat so that we could have a really lovely morning, just like one last time together, creating some really happy memories. I had a camera. It was before the days of digital cameras and even mobile phones. So it was just your normal point and click camera. I took loads and loads of photos of them. And it was with a very, very heavy heart when I had to say goodbye to them and see them off. So later that afternoon, I went to a chemist with my camera, and so they could develop my photos. A few days later, I went back to that chemist, eagerly awaiting to see these photos, only to be told that the film was corrupt and none of the photos were developed. Now, I was devastated. I felt like I'd been kicked in the face by the world. I felt like the universe was completely against me. Not only had I felt that I'd lost my children, but I also lost that last thing, that last physical thing that I could have of them. And this led to a very dark and deep depression. It also led to me losing my job at the time. Now, I was very lucky to be living in a flat that was owned by my stepfather. So I had a roof over my head, but I didn't have any money for gas, electric, even for food at times. Very, very hard, desperate times. And this was leading up to Christmas. Now, I remember on Christmas Day, I had an invitation to spend Christmas, part of Christmas afternoon, with a friend of mine. She knew of some of my situation, and it was very nice of her to reach out to me so that I could have something to eat on Christmas Day. So I went to her house. We had a really lovely meal, and I just loved soaking up the environment, the traditional Christmas environment, the fire going, the carols, the Christmas tree, really warm, loving, inviting environment. But when I got back to my flat, I couldn't help but be disturbed by the complete contrast between the two. So my flat, as I said, there was no electric, there was no gas, it was very dark, there's no heating. I had icicles growing on the inside of my bedroom window. And I felt that life could not get any worse. In fact, I decided to end my life on Christmas evening 1995. Now, I did make a serious attempt at this, and thankfully it didn't work because I am here now and my life is completely different to what it used to be then. So what are some of what are some of the things that I was able to do to completely change my life around and get my life back on track? Okay, so the first step was that I had to recognize the thought patterns and behaviors that were making things worse. So my downward spiral, it was made worse through selfish thinking. So in other words, I'll give an example. I was more consumed with the grief of losing my children and feeling hard done by that than I was of thinking about how they were doing. How were they doing without their father? How were they doing on the other side of the country? I didn't think of that. I just thought about myself and about how hard done by I was, which of course, that kind of thinking, it just makes things worse. The second thing I did was to reach out to someone. I reached out to three people. The first person was my mum. So I told her, not in so many details, but I told her what I was going through, and she was able to offer some words of comfort. The second person I spoke to was a friend who was able to put me in contact with a counsellor. So I reached out to a family member, a friend, and a professional, and that really, really helped. The third thing was to recognize the external factors that were negatively impacting my life, but not just to recognize them, to do something positive about it. So I was living in a flat that had no electric, no gas, I had no food. Why was that? It was because I had no money. Why didn't I have any money? Because I didn't have a job. Now, I might have felt as if I wasn't a worthy enough person to be working, but I knew I had to do something about that. So I went and got a job. I also realized that at times I was isolating myself, or I didn't want people to come around and visit me. So what could I do about that? I could start engaging in my friends a little bit more, or I could increase my social circle. Another thing was I realized that there wasn't much joy in my life. And one of the things at that time that I found quite joyful was being musically creative. So I hooked up with somebody and we would get together once a week to create music. The fourth thing was to work on my sense of self, but in a non-egotistical way. What I mean by that is that I felt bad things were going to happen and bad things were always going to happen. And because I felt that way, I was attracting all this bad energy. I had to realize that the whole world did not revolve around me. And very often, when we get into a negative state of thinking, like a negative cycle of thinking, we become very self-absorbed and egocentric. So the fourth thing is to realize that the whole world does not revolve around you. Number five was that I had to realize that what I was doing didn't define me as a person. It didn't define my worth as a person. So because I was estranged from my children, I felt I didn't deserve to have children. And because I was living in a cold, dark flat, I felt I didn't deserve to have friends come round to visit. And because I was working in a factory, I didn't deserve to be anything other than a factory worker. And I mean no disrespect to people that work in factories. I had to realize that there was more to me than what I did, and there was more to me than my job title. And that's something that I still hold true now. So although I life coach, I would much rather be regarded as someone who is kind, compassionate and loving than someone who is a life coach or someone who used to be a factory worker. So it's about realizing that what you do does not define you as a person. So I'll quickly go through those 5 steps again. The first one is to recognize the thought patterns and behaviors that are making your situation worse. The second one is to reach out to someone or reach out to as many people as possible. Number 3 is to recognize the external factors that are negatively impacting your life and do something positive about them. Number 4 is to work on your sense of self in a non-egotistical way. Realize that the world does not revolve around you. And number 5 is to realize that what you are doing does not define you as a person. And that's it. I feel quite a bit better for sharing that. And obviously, when we do share things, we do feel a lot better. And that's part of number 2, reaching out to someone. I hope that helps some of you in some way. So if you would like this information on a cheat sheet, then just reply with the words, leave me a comment with the words "my life," and I will send that to you via Facebook Messenger. Now I'm going to leave you with a question. I don't normally do this, but this kind of ties in with what we were talking about. And the question is this: who are you? Now, I want you to think about this, pay this some thought, maybe think about it for about 5 minutes. But I want you to answer without using anything that describes what you do or any negative emotion that you encounter or feel at times. So I'll repeat that. Answer, who are you, without describing what you do or any negative emotion that you encounter. It's about finding out who you are as a person, because who you are as a person is nothing to do with the things that you do or the things that you feel negatively. Thank you very much for watching today. I really appreciate it. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.